there any comments from the public now on the agenda? Yeah. This is the time for reports and information, 9A, Meteor Pilot Project.
Thank you. So tonight with us, we have Brian Weber and Gina Levere from Meteor. And so they, if you remember, we are in started the pilot project in the fall, and also with them, we have 2 teachers at each firm and one block. And so they're going to talk a little bit about the pilot program, and I can just give you an update. So I'm going to turn it over to Gina and Brian.
Yeah. All right. Good evening, School Board President Ms. Riley and fellow board members. I am Jean Levere with Meteor Education, and my colleague Brian Wimmer is with me tonight. And as Doreen said, we have Ms. Black from Park Avenue and Ms. Cron from April Lane with us this evening to share their journey of their pilot classrooms. We would like to thank the district, the site leaders, and the pilot teachers for inviting us to come along and share this journey with them. I'm going to turn this over to Ryan.
So this has been a great process going through with the administration and the pilot teachers. And I apologize. Thank you for having me, President Riley and fellow board members. We are excited to talk a little bit about this. So why we undertook this project and came alongside the district in this. We know that the education system's been presented with immense challenges over the last few years that have offered some unique opportunities for how students and teachers engage with each other. The expectations of learning have been changing over the years, from students going into new fields that require them to do a lot of different types of learning and applying knowledge. So we brought this mindset into this process, and understanding that the tools of teaching have changed, and the learning environment is just another tool that teachers can use to support that type of interactions that are happening in the classrooms. So looking at that environment, we're helping to talk with teachers in the district and how we can go from more passive teaching methods to offering tools that help students in a more participatory learning environment.
We did not correct the same notes. Sorry. So in September of 2021, we met with the district and the site leadership to discuss what were the priority learning outcomes they wanted to see come out of their classrooms. And they identified these 4. So you have critical thinking and problem solving, wellness and safety, that includes intellectual, social, emotional, and physical, and authentic learning engagement and collaboration. So what does that mean? So that means we want flexible learning environments, a space that can be used in a variety of ways and grouped in various sizes. We want mobility, so for desks and tables to have wheels or light enough for students to move. We want dynamic and flexible seating. What does that mean? Multiple choices in the room where they have wobble stools or rocker chairs or different height stools. Writable surfaces such as whiteboard laminate surfaces inside of that space. Storage that aids instruction, so student accessible storage. Mobile teacher work areas and having that closer proximity for the students and the teachers to be close together. And then student work surfaces, multi-height, backpack hooks, again, giving students voice and choice inside the classroom.
As Gina shared, when we met with the district administrators and site administrators in September, we were working on creating alignment through the vision and through the expectations of what's happening. What you're seeing on the screen here are claymen that were created during this admin visioning session, and they represent the issues that arise when there's a lack of alignment in the vision and expectations. Each person at the meeting was asked to create, they were given a note card that says create this body part with no, they weren't allowed to talk to anybody, they weren't allowed to interact and really share what they thought it was supposed to come together. And when they came back together to share their results, this is what was made by the two teams. As you'll see, when we don't have that cohesive vision, we're going to run into issues when we have different ideas. I hit it on my slide. So what we were able to do every year is look at how we bring the methods, the tools, and the environments that schools have together with a student-focused lens that allow teachers and students to interact in a variety of different ways. Through the visioning with admin, common language, understanding, and mental image of what they wanted to see learning look like in the classrooms came together. And we took this vision and we brought it to our meetings with the pilot teachers and used it as the goalpost as we collaborated with the teachers to hear what they needed in their spaces to help meet these expectations in learning and environment functionality. So what we're going to do now is give Ms. Black and Ms. Cron an opportunity to share some of their experience through this process, what they learned, what their students learned, and hear directly from. So I'll hand it over to Ms. Black. Thank you for joining us today.
So good evening, board members. My name is Margot Black, and I am a first and second grade teacher at Park Avenue Elementary School, depending on what year you're talking about. So this is my classroom, what it looked like at the beginning of this school year. And I can tell you right now, my back already hurts looking at my previous desk setup. As you can see, my laptop is on a student desk. That student desk, if you open it, it will crunch your fingers. Park Avenue is celebrating our 75th anniversary this fall, as many of you know. And I can promise you some of that furniture at Park Avenue was there on day one. So I can tell you that this furniture pilot was an absolute godsend for us. For every teacher that's been at a yard sale on a Saturday trying to pick up furniture for their classroom, this was a win. So this is what my new learning space looks like now, thank you to Meteor Furniture and to the graciousness of our district and our board. As you can see, my students have autonomy and choice in the classroom for the very first time. They have places where they can be comfortable. They have opportunities for collaborative learning, critical problem solving, STEM projects, anything you can imagine. The possibilities are endless with this furniture, and I am so, so excited to have this as a part of my classroom. Now, that being said, there's so many more benefits to it. So one of the other benefits that I found was that, so we all have some friends in the classroom that sometimes make some choices that are maybe a little bit less favorable. And this furniture was actually really just so engaging for them. They were able to move, they had sensory input for the first time, and I would actually argue that I had a decrease in behavior issues after implementing this furniture in the classroom. I would also say that it gave more comfortability to my students who didn't outrightly need those sensory outputs. I saw kids that were usually pretty quiet using them, and they just felt so much more comfortable. You could see how their anxiety changed. There's something about being comfortable in your environment that makes learning so much more tangible. So that was very exciting. My last big point is, frankly, a personal one. I moved classrooms today. I moved from one corner campus to the other corner, and you bet I took that furniture with me. And thank you to my amazing janitorial staff. They were able to get it over in one day. I set up my entire classroom in 90 minutes today. Wow. 90 minutes. I got everything back to where it was. There was wheels on it. You guys, I can stand here and tell you my muscles are not sore, nothing disintegrated. It was fantastic. So I'm so, so, so excited about this furniture. I really want to highlight the point that students do best in an environment where they feel respected and that environment is created with intention for them. And I have a quick video I want to show you of my students walking in on their very first day. They've never seen it before. And I want you to notice how their attitude about the classroom changes and how their excitement for learning really grows based on simply what we have set them up. We've set them up for success. Oh, I'm sorry. There's one more video. This is a classroom hand scan of my students at work. That was my student teacher in the corner, working with a small group. And again, you can see lots of autonomy where the kids choose to sit. So this one is the community table where they can work together. Oh, those highly coveted beanbag chairs. Ooh, doggy.
I want to know how many fights you have over those.
You know what? So I will say there was a learning curve, but that being said, like holding on, like their behavior changed because like you don't want to lose your flexible seating. Like that's a big deal. And losing that high table and those beanbag chairs, oh man, that's worse than losing recess. That's worse than any other thing that you could imagine.
So they share them.
Huh?
They share them equally. Okay.
Yeah, so actually, so for my particular classroom, I can't speak to everyone else, we had them assigned per day. So I had 2 kids that sat on them in the morning session, 2 kids that sat on them in the afternoon session, and we, of course, sprayed them down. But anywho, yeah, first day, let's do it. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
How many beanbags total in the classroom?
2.
Ooh. I was wondering the same thing as Mary asked about.
I know,
What
it's
kind
our
of arguments that
You-
happened, actually?
Yeah, okay. Okay. There should be sound there. Sorry, no audio. Okay, no worries.
You can see on her face,
Yeah.
there's the little girl on the left there.
Yeah. She's saying, oh my gosh, very, very loudly, just so. Parents were very excited too.
How many children do you have in your class?
22. Oh, yeah.
Straight out of it.
Straight on the feedback.
That's why I was wondering.
There's an audio clip of me saying, oh no, hold on. Yeah.
The dog class.
And that's actually something we heard from 1st grade through 8th grade. Soft seating was, students were getting as many possible bodies, whether it was 8th grade boys or 1st grade girls, it did not matter. They all wanted to pile next to each other on there if given the opportunity.
Yeah. And you get to see, they're just so excited. Like, this is something that's so brand new for them. And this, y'all, I actually looped with this group. This was my group during distance learning in 1st grade. So I had them for 1st grade, and then I had them again for 2nd grade. So I got to see them at where they're like, maybe they're most comfortable, like at home in their bed in their pajamas, to this, and just seeing the change in them, like from maybe too comfortable to too firm to too stiff to this. It's such an incredible change. So.
What time of year when did you get the new furniture?
So the new furniture actually only arrived right after spring break.
Okay.
So we only had it for a couple of months, but we were able to get our routines down in about 2 weeks.
And can I ask you, how's it holding up?
It's great so far. I haven't had any problems with it. Well, I mean, some of them are supposed to, but yes. Yeah, no, I have not had any problems with stability. And I did ask the janitorial staff today, because like I said, they had to move it across campus, and they said they didn't have any problems with anything related to the wheels. Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like to invite Kathy Clement next.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. This is the first picture on the left is what my classroom used to look like. And I've been a learning center teacher with the district for several years now. I think like I'm getting ready to start my 17th year here with the district and work with some of you. Moving around from site to site, being a learning center, a lot of times you have the leftover furniture that's not being used in the standard classrooms. It's whatever is left and whatever you can get your hands on to build a learning center. And in some of the sites I've been in, I actually was creating a new learning center because they hadn't had one and that they needed an additional at that site or something. And so I'm looking for pieces of furniture. And working with students from TK to 5th grade all in the same room with the same furniture, sometimes the kids were having to accommodate for the furniture instead of the other way around. And so sometimes that meant little shoe boxes for the kindergartners to put their feet on because the tables were high enough for the bigger kids, but not really small enough for the younger kids. And so I really have made do over the years, and it's been fine. It just wasn't the best, right? So when I was given this opportunity to have all new furniture at my site, I jumped on it. Granted, I was nervous just like every other teacher was nervous about it. Some people have been doing this a long time or had their classroom set up in a certain way for a long time. And so there was this emotional attachment to the furniture and the room setup and the worry that you weren't going to get enough stuff or enough storage. And so those were all real concerns people had. But I think one of the main things that I had to do to process through that was I spent some time in my room after school. And I did some things like sitting at my desk. And I would say, so what do I need this desk for? What do I use it for? Can it look different? You know, how can I make it, if it was mobile, what would I do with it? And so I really had to just kind of talk myself into what could this look like? What could this be for my students? And so that was how I shifted my mindset, because you really do have to shift your mindset first to make it work and then embrace it all. And so, and I got lots of phone calls from Brian and meetings with how's it going for you? What do you think about this design? Could we do it this way? And I think we changed it 3-4 times before we actually decided on the furniture. And so you can see on the right, something totally different for these kids. I was able to set up 3 learning stations plus a lounge. And the 3 stations are based on grade level. So I have tables now for TK through first grade. With TK through first grade flexible seating, I have a table set up 2nd, 3rd grade with 2nd, 3rd grade seating, and I have a 4th, 5th grade table with 4th, 5th grade size chairs. And then I have this flexible seating area in the center that can be used for all grade levels. So it actually now, the furniture is for the kids, and it actually benefits the kids. I had 3 sets of round tables in mind. All writable surfaces, we write right on the table, whether it's a behavior and we're writing a star chart right on the fly, or whether we're writing a math table of something that they need to work on and solve. It's all right there for them right on the table. The tables have wheels, but not every leg has a wheel, so then they're not all wobbly and moving around. It's very sturdy. But if I have some kids who now all of a sudden need to work independently, they pull away and they work, and it's great. And I can walk between them. And then when we're ready to come back, let's all come together, and they all come back together. The lounge area in the middle, the kids were super excited about the lounge area in the middle and how they were able to be creative with how to just hang out over there and it be quiet. You can see in the middle one, there is someone on the beanbag. I have one beanbag. And those are really nice beanbags, by the way. These beanbags are Tempur-Pedic. They're not those old styrofoam beans that are going to fall apart. These are really nice. And so they do like it. I changed the center a little bit now, where I've added the transportation table. Is that what it's called? The round one that moves. I think they call it transportation
your facilitation station, the height adjustable
facilitation station. Everything has a name. And it's a height adjustable round table. We run that and wheel it right in front of that little sofa. You got a kid coming in needing to take a test. There's a foot pedal on it. Pop it down. They throw their laptop on it and sit there right at the couch. And just sit there quietly and take their test. When they're done, I can take that same station, that same table, put my foot on it, pop it up, put my laptop on it, and I can stand and present from it. Same piece of furniture, and I can move it around.
It's like a Google record.
Yeah.
No, it's not there.
So, and then you can also see that on my carts, that the first slide is my area in the center of the room. That's the student access area. So that's the student library, that's the dictionaries, that's all their math manipulatives, that's all the crayons, markers, scissors. All that stuff is right there in the center of the room and at full access to the students. The center table, center picture, you can see I have some 5th grade students working on some math. They each have their own formulas they're working on that are there right on the table for them to look at. And they are working out the problems right there on the table. The last one is a little video. This is a student actually taking statewide testing. So on this one here on the end, I'm not taking a picture of the screen, so there's no cheating going on. But I did take a little video of this boy taking his statewide test, and you can see him in the rocker, totally engaged and taking that statewide test while he rocked. And that student has multiple disabilities and was quietly taking that statewide test. Is that right? Is that it? Okay. All right. So anyway, it has worked out really great. The flexible seating, the kids are not fighting over the flexible seating. I know that was a question. None of them fight over the flexible seating. I have rockers. I have stationary ottomans. I have rocking ottomans that kind of wobble. I have wobble chairs. I do have one stationary chair at each one of my tables. Sometimes they choose it, but for the most part, their favorite is the rocking ottoman. That one is their very, very favorite. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next few slides, which I'm sure you have seen, are just some additional voices from the classrooms, from the teachers and students. We'll get into just a couple of slides of our survey from the teachers and the students. We know that this was scary for the district and the pilot teachers, but as you can hear and see, the outcomes were very, very positive.
Can I ask you a question real quick? As far as like, because I kind of jumped in here and
Sure.
the ratings a little bit. And it looks like everybody's really happy with it. I mean, it's like 4.3 or 2 and above, out of 5. Except for TKK. Do you have any idea why that might be discovered?
There are some discrepancies of TKK and K and dramatic play. So I think it's something that we are still in discussions with of what the district's curriculum supports with the dramatic play inside those classrooms.
There are other things that make it difficult. When you teach kindergarten, you want to reach across the table to a small group because many times you have to assist them to write. If you have 2 of the tables pushed together, you can no longer reach across the table to do that. If you only have 1, you can only have 3 children at the table. Students were also, the wobbly stools were falling off. It's not a carpeted area. There were other things besides dramatic play discrepancies.
Understood. I wasn't.
So I think, Shelley, the thing was that the furniture selection when the teachers got it, probably that was why it was pilot. It just, as Tricia's saying, it just didn't quite meet the needs. And I think there was concern regarding TK and K in the same furniture, so that's a dialogue that needs to continue with TK.
Right. Well, and it sounds like you guys were more than willing to work with and change things up as you got feedback from the teachers. So maybe working a little bit more extensively with the TK and K teachers to find solutions for some of their issues.
Definitely.
Get that back up into the 4 point something.
That is definitely our goal, yes. And then also just an update on your wellness centers. So creating a wellness center at every campus was the outcome of one of the district's priority learning outcomes, wellness and safety. And so the wellness centers allow students to experience a calm and relaxing environment while being in a physical safe space that can offer social and emotional support. So thus far, the district has implemented 7 wellness centers at 7 sites. And we will commence the design discovery with the remaining 7 when everyone comes back from summer break to complete the remaining 7 this next school year.
Dory, I have a question on those wellness centers.
Is there someone in those at all times? You know, a staff person when the student goes in there?
Yes, so the students can't go in by themselves.
Okay.
So generally what's happening is the counselors' offices are now in that space. in
Okay.
some fashion. But yeah, students cannot go in there unsupervised at all.
Okay. Yeah,
And
that's
then-
why I wanted to know.
And then just a quick timeline of the pilot process. We commenced this journey back in September of 2021, where teacher applications were sent out. They were requested for your teachers to apply, and those were accepted. In October, we kicked off the design discovery meetings with the pilot teachers, and that's where we laid the framework. We presented them with the priority learning outcomes. What does that mean? And then we had 3 subsequent design meetings with those pilot teachers, and we had them by grade band. So we meet with just the TKK teachers, the 1st through 2nd teachers, 2nd, 3rd through 5th, 6th through 8, and then each one of those disciplines. We wanted to make sure that we were very focused on what their needs were. And so after each design meeting, we would come back, we would listen to what they were requesting, and then we present those changes to them at that next design meeting. In March, Brian and his team of learning experience coordinators who are former educators came out to meet with the pilot teachers to ensure their questions were answered and introduce the functionality of their new learning environments, so that when we came in April over spring break to install those and deliver those furniture in the classrooms, they were prepared, right? Because it was scary. You're moving my cheese, right? Even though we're excited to get the new furniture, we're also scared to get the new furniture. And so during spring break, we delivered 47 pilot classrooms and 7 wellness centers. And then in May, Brian came back out to meet with the teachers and provided in-classroom support. So we never removed the teachers from their classrooms. That was all support inside of the room with them. And then at the end of the pilot process, so the last week of school, we sent out a survey. We're going to go over that in just a few minutes, where we asked the teachers and the students for them to rate the furniture as well as their experience. And so through that, we met with them in June. I think it was the 2nd day after school got out. We asked the teachers to come back. We reviewed the survey results with them. And then we have them in their cohorts again by their grade bands. And then they chose what items they wanted to replace with anything that received a score of 4 or less. It was a topic of conversation. And so there was alignment that happened with those teachers of what was going to work for them.
Let's talk a little bit about the data as we're going through this. So first thing, I want to address some concerns that were brought up on this slide. We've made a few little tweaks to help make it more understandable of what we're representing here. So we, as Gina shared, we sent out a survey to all of the pilot staff, and we also provided them with a survey that they could provide their students. We had 40 of the 49 pilot teachers return those surveys with their feedback, and we had over 900 student responses from all the pilot classrooms. So what you had previously seen is how we had shared it with the teachers. What you're looking at here today is a summarization of that feedback. So the pilot teachers, as you look at it, we had those 40 responses. Out of all of the items in all of their classrooms that they had, they got to rate each one. And out of everything, they had 72% of the stuff in their rooms they liked. They thought this was great, this is spot on, this is what we should go forward with. Of that other 25, 24% of things, those are what we brought up in that June meeting and really nailed down and said, here's what your feedback was. You said that the instruction station, the technology station wasn't working for what you had. One of the pieces that they talked about was a place for their computer. Well, we learned for some teachers that use just a laptop and a document camera, that was a perfect setup for them to be able to stand, be connected to their board, and have their technology. For some teachers who had, more computer pieces from COVID, that wasn't quite the working piece. So we found other options for them. There were some concerns about the rocking chairs being a little bit things. So we provided them a couple of different options of rocking chairs that had smaller footprints, those type of things, and say, hey, we're hearing what you're saying on these pieces. Here are some other ideas to think about. So come together as a grade level band and decide what it is you all think is best after this experience. Okay? So the teachers had a 1 to 5 scale that they used. The students had, it was more of a 1 to 4, but we did it as words, as I don't like it, this is good, or I absolutely love it. So on the right, of all of the feedback we had from students, they had 76% thought that things in the classroom, they loved it or they were really good. So it was a lot of very positive feedback, and mainly around the seating. The teachers could also comment on any piece of furniture, and we heard time and time again from the teachers that they were just surprised at how many of the students, there wasn't fights over the seating. They expected that, but when we looked at all of those different types of sensory input, whether it was soft or it was rocking or it was stable or it was tall, kids like certain things. And those kids were drawn to the pieces that worked for them on the days that it worked for them, and the other kids went to the pieces that they were drawn to. So there was a lot of feedback around that, hey, I expected there to be behavior issues, but it was the exact opposite, as you've heard. That kids really found what worked well for them. Yeah. So next, we also asked the teachers to just rate their experience, bless you, to rate their experience of the whole process, because this was stressful. I cannot say that enough. The pilot teachers, and I said this to every classroom run in, I asked the kids to give their teachers a round of applause, because they put in hours and hours of extra work so that their students could get this experience. Whether it was all the design meetings that they came to after hours or during their prep times, or coming in June to meet with us, whether it was having to come into their classrooms, having to set up their classrooms on just days before coming back from spring break and going into state testing. It really, there was a lot of stress there, and this is the feedback we got. As we see in here, we had good experiences across the board, and the TK and K, there's definitely there was questions that we need to address. We learned a couple of things, especially about the wobble stools, that for the younger ones, when they have a tile floor over a carpeted floor, the wobble stools don't work as well and they slip. So we provided them options saying, hey, if these, because the ones we're talking about are little plastic wobble stools that have a small base, maybe what we showed them were the larger foam ottomans that are, about 8 inches wider, that are much more stable and don't slip. So providing some of those similar opportunities for sensory input and seating, but looking at, hey, we hear what your struggles are and we want to make sure that we address them before we move forward in this process. And you'll see we had great feedback from a lot of the grade bands, but every grade band came together to have to make those decisions on what the final outcome of this project was going to be. It was not, me you're saying this is what you're taking, or the district, but here are your options, talk it out, and you should have heard the bartering and collaboration that was going amongst these teachers during that June meeting. As you can imagine, they're on summer break, and they got a lot of opinions, but they also know when it's done, they get to leave. So there was some bartering, and we finally had to tell a couple of the groups, like, all right, we can circle back to some of these, but we're running over on time, and let's come together on this. So there was a lot of really great feedback, and that was brought back to our designers to start making those changes as we move forward. Any questions on the data part so far? Yes.
I have a question. You've done a really great job highlighting the positives. I kind of want to dive a little bit or ask a question about maybe some of the challenges, and maybe it's more directed towards the teachers that have had the experience with those. At least from what I've gathered, you guys have done a great job as far as collaboration goes. Just if there's any challenges that you guys have noticed up until this point.
Do you mean regarding like bringing the new furniture in, or just collaboration amongst colleagues?
I'm sorry. I mean more so when it comes back to furniture and utilizing it within your classroom. I know you spoke to some of the challenges with the TKK. Is there anything that you guys have seen maybe that like within your classrooms it's been kind of a challenge with the furniture?
The only one with me was already mentioned by Brian, and that was the rocking chairs, like what I showed in the video with the boy. Those rocking chairs are great, but they do have a big footprint, so the back of them, if you're walking around a table, you can trip over those. And so that's a little bit of an issue. And so I have to strategically put the rocking chairs in areas where it's more against a wall, to where we're not going to walk around as much. As far as the furniture itself is very, very sturdy. I was worried in the beginning because I have a lot of drawers that I actually take out and remove, put on the table and put back in because I have small groups. And so all my drawers are labeled by the time of my group. And so that goes out. When my group is done, it goes back in, the next bucket comes out. And I thought I was going to break them in the beginning. And it might have been Gina. Somebody came in and said, those are made out of the same plastic that they made football helmets out of. Don't worry about it. They're not going to break. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to use these suckers. And so they have not. They've held up. They're great. And furniture-wise, the only thing was the ordering part. You don't know in the beginning whether or not you're going to get not enough, too much furniture in the room. And so that's kind of tricky in the beginning. And I was pretty modest when I was doing the ordering, and so it turns out that I need a couple more pieces, but other than that, it's been a pretty smooth process, and the furniture's all very, very sturdy. I was really surprised.
I'd like to, so I also had a similar problem with the rocking chairs. We have several, I have several stuffed toast until we figured those out, but like Brian had said, they brought in a rocking chair that was much smaller, had less of a big rock, so I wasn't getting seasick watching the kids. But my biggest challenges furniture-wise was probably the classroom library setup. So my classroom library was the drawers that she was referencing. I have a problem where I have a lot of books, and so the drawers got really heavy really quickly. And that meeting in June was actually incredibly helpful because we got to talk about all those problems, and we really did have the opportunity to problem solve. So those drawers are actually being removed from the classroom, and we're just going to get standard bookshelves instead.
So Brian, if you look at mine, you can see that my library, I chose my standard bookshelves.
Yeah.
So when I did mine, for the same reason, I thought that originally he asked me about the cart, the one that has the books that kind of all go this way, and it seemed visually overstimulating for my students. And so we opted for something
Right.
it's a little more subdued and easier to get in.
I would say the biggest challenge at this point is simply the fact that even on Park Avenue's campus, all of our classrooms are so incredibly different. So like I'm in a portable, one of my colleagues has a ton of built-ins in her classroom. So we all got different amounts of furniture and different pieces to try to meet our needs. I have too much furniture in it. So there's a few pieces that like I could very easily let go of and delete. But those are pieces that other classrooms would need. So I think that's probably going to be our biggest challenge is figuring out what is not enough versus too much, tailored to each individual classroom.
Configuration.
Yeah. That was kind of one of the things that I was thinking about. I'm a classroom teacher as well. That's worked at multiple school sites within the district. And when you look at, you guys had talked a little bit about the collaboration and how you guys have really, allowed the teachers to go back as grade levels and figure out what the need is for that grade level. I guess maybe one of the concerns is how does that look in the grand scheme of things? Because the classroom at Gray Avenue might be different than a classroom at AK or Riverbend size-wise, furniture-wise.
And that's exactly what Meteor has already, Gina and we've already had that conversation, understanding, and some of it, the casing's gonna need to be removed, because it's not, there's like countertops that don't do anything, so we used to have desktops, so we're gonna remove those. So they realize the process in which we're designing the classrooms is gonna be a little bit different.
Yeah, and that was a big lesson that we learned is we assumed that all portables were like, and they're not. And so this last week, we just came out and measured 97 classrooms. And we're not going to assume any classroom is the same from here on out. And so every single classroom will be designed specifically to that room to make sure that we're meeting the needs for every single teacher.
And will those teachers, is it gonna be that there's like a menu of like, hey, this is something for this grade band, these are the approved furniture pieces, select what your need is, or is that gonna, what's the process gonna look like? You know, or are we still
We're
figuring
still
that out?
working on that.
Okay.
But we do want it to be, as you can see, I mean, I think there was a lot of concern about whether or not this truly was going to be a teacher-led project. You can see it is. And so there is going to be that discussion about, and there, we've already talked about, you know, so-and-so wants, and we know we have to be flexible because our classrooms are so different.
Yeah.
And storage for some is a big thing for teachers. And so, you know, we just, in some cases, there is no storage because it's an empty portable. So we know we have to get more storage for those classrooms versus those that have, you know, bookshelves and built-ins. And so we're just gonna have to be flexible and have to look at that and adjust. And that's part of the conversation with teachers.
And so there's a couple of pieces in this all too. As we went through the pilot process, we did get that final feedback survey and how did it all go. But throughout the process, we also sent, it was about 2 or 3 weeks in, I believe, we sent a survey out where teachers could say, hey, is there too much stuff in your space? Is there not? Is there something you're missing? To start gauging where things might be moved, how we could tailor it back. So we were trying to understand as well. We know that there's too much in a few of these spaces, which came from that collaborative process of some teachers saying, hey, I really, really need this, and others, you know, not needing it just based on their classroom. So looking at some of those common pieces, we know that we want mobility in the student desks. We know that a lot of the teachers really like the whiteboard desk. So having some of those commonalities through student-facing pieces throughout the classroom, but then looking at what teachers are for their specific stuff and understanding, as we talked in that June meeting, what, if you have nothing, what is it that you need? And then we can go back from there saying, oh, we know XYZ classroom has this whole built-in casework. Okay, so they might not need these closing cabinets. They'll just need the library cabinets and those type of things. So looking at what is it that is, if you have a blank slate, and paring back, and that's where Gina's gone out with the team and our design team will work on meeting those specific standards. Yes.
I know that there were a couple of high school classrooms.
There was one high school special ed room and one wellness center. So there was, we did do.
I thought there was an English teacher
there was not, there wasn't, we only did the gen ed classrooms up to 8th grade. They started as part of the discovery process when we initially started that. But in going through there and trying to land on how that was going to look in the high schools, there was a pause put on that going into this. The one special ed teacher at Yuba City High School, she did really want to move forward in the process and try that. So we did do a pilot there, and I met with her and worked with stuff in her space as well. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
We want to, so what the plan is for me or Ernest to meet with the high school staff involved to talk about that, because we understand that there was some challenges there, so we just paused that. But we didn't want to keep moving out, but we thought, you know, it's not, we just need to get more voices. So we did follow through with the special education classroom and the wellness center.
That's a just good department.
Yeah, that's kind of what they're going to be doing. So.
But yeah, so to your point, to your question though, what are some of the things that don't? Libraries. One of the things that we tried was looking at using some drawers because they offered more linear inches of storage, but more space doesn't necessarily mean the right space. So that was one of the things that we looked at. As I said, the technology carts were another piece that we looked at. The beanbags, while the kids loved them, they were large. So I know that was one of the things we pared back. But then there's other pieces that, you know, the teachers, one I'm thinking of is a vertical spinning bookcase or storage piece. that initially the teachers were like, I'm not sure about this. And I fully expected in that June meeting that thing to be gone. And they all like, no, actually, after these 6 weeks, this has worked out great for me. I've got their journals in here, however they're using it. Because we kept saying, is this a piece that you have found a use for? Or is this a piece that has a specific use in your class? Because we know teachers are going to make anything work. Like, you give them something new, they're going to make it work in a way that's working for them. But we wanted to make sure that there was actually the right piece and not just something that they found a use that they liked for. So that was part of that conversation, to keep pushing back of, we've got options. You're not locked into anything. How can we make sure it's the right stuff? So that is part of that. I just want to point out something really cool here. So this classroom on the bottom right, this is part of the setup for, this was the ELA history setup for the pilot. And you'll see this teacher took, those are 4 individual armless chairs that they put together, and they brought a flip and mess table and some wobble stools around, and put that as the front center, because he said, my kids love this thing. They love the soft seating, and they had it set up as a booth in the back of the room. He's like, the kids were running to the back corner immediately. So we rearranged it and put it front and center. I was in his classroom during a break period. I saw a girl come in and put her balloon on the chair because she wanted to mark it. And then as the bell rang, everybody started hustling in. Some boy tried to move it, and he's like, no. She came in and put her balloon there. Like, that seat is saved. So it was really interesting how the teachers took their own initiative, because this space is the same furniture as the one in the top right corner, but a different classroom. So this was another ELA teacher who, she said, hey, I want to do a Socratic fishbowl. So she had half of her class sitting in the middle, talking about the Emancipation Proclamation, answering each other's questions. This is what I thought was really interesting, while the other half of the students would sit on the outside and listen in and take notes, and then they would flip-flop. And she said, like, I really wanted to try this. This is one of the formations that we had talked about during some of our trainings and when I came in and talked with teachers. But you can see how she took that same set of furniture that was 2 doors down and created this, and she said, hey, on Fridays, the next couple of Fridays, I'm going to use this setup where the kids are actually teaching each other and reviewing it, and I'm sitting back and just jumping in when I need to. And it was funny to listen to her explain how that sitting back and just letting the kids talk was really one of the most scary parts of it, because you don't know what's going to come out of a middle schooler's mouth, but it was some really good stuff for her, so she was very excited.
We're wrapping up, I promise.
Yeah, and that's that. So a couple last things here and we'll be done. So what we want to work with teachers on in the district is a pro-social environment. So pro-social behaviors are defined as behaviors through which people benefit others, including helping, cooperating, comforting, and sharing ideas. Pro-social learning ecosystem are spaces that support these behaviors in student-centered environments. So looking at learning at the core, are we delivering instruction that students are engaging with and creating spaces for them to collaboratively inquire and ask questions of each other and create respectful communication within that environment. One of the things that we heard from teachers is, and as you saw in some of the comments, is by being able to rearrange the classroom, they were able to have different conversations and support different conversations with their students. And these are some of the things that as we continue this rollout, we want to look at and make sure are moving forward within the classroom. At Meteor, we are big on what we call the accelerated engagement flywheel. So we know when we get that flywheel moving, learning is just going to keep moving further and further. We believe it starts with a foundation of relational engagement between the student and the teacher that can really support a deeper level of cognitive rigor and challenging kids when they have that safety within their environment. And as the students and teachers build that cognitive rigor, they have those relational trust, they can move into agentic learning, where we've heard teachers are giving students options in the different types of projects they're doing, where they're sitting in the classroom, how they're arranging the space that's going to work best for them. And that helps create a deeper sense of learning as they go into that participatory learning methods. So design is not just what it looks like, it's how it works. And in that, we know that just providing furniture to teachers is not the end-all be-all of changing anything, right? We need to support them in making that transition. I always share with the teachers that I work with, Between setting up my first classroom and showing up on the first day, I received a smart board that I did not know and I was never trained on. The software was never installed on my computer, so that did not get used for the first 6 months of school. I didn't have the training. We want to come alongside the teachers and provide that baseline training, as you heard, that helps them understand how the different pieces function and what are some of the possibilities, because we know teachers are going to come up with the best ideas for their classrooms when they feel comfortable. And trying something in front of 28 or 32 eyes is not the first time you want to do that. So we want to be there to support staff, and as you heard, make sure that they're feeling confident in making this transition into a space that's very different than what they've experienced in the past. So we appreciate the huge amount of time you gave us to go through all this and the questions. And if there's anything else that we can share, please let us know. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that. We at the university level are using furniture similar to this, but it's usually in the student lounge areas where they can collaborate together and do it comfortably. And so it's in our STEM center right now, but we're moving it out into others. So it's ready.
That's what we love to hear. Thank you all so very much for the time.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, Kat.
Charter school position and oversight.
So I'd like to introduce Lisa Maury with Megan Friedman and Full Frost, also known as F3, Triple F. And she's going to take us through, take the board through just this charter school petition process and oversight, so that we have a charter petition before us right now. You can expect to know what will happen in the next few months.
Thank you, and thank you all for having me. I don't have any cute videos, unfortunately, of cute classrooms in this presentation, but and I will say at the outset that the slide deck is chock-a-block full of actually a lot of content, which is contrary to my normal style, but I wanted you all to have at the ready and as a resource later all of the information that I'm going to be sharing with you, so that if you have any questions, you can look at the slides and you can find what you need. And if there's any questions that come up later, you can forward those to the superintendent and work with staff, which will be supporting on the charter petition review. Is it still on? So just to sort of frame the conversation and frame this presentation, the charter schools movement is established in California through the Charter Schools Act of 1992. In the Education Code, it really sets out the intent of the charter school movement. It was originally intended to really be an incubator, foster innovation in public schools, free school agencies, schools from a lot of the rules and the laws that would otherwise create some tensions with innovative programs. So that was the original intent. It's set forth in Education Code 47601, as well as additionally in 47605. In 2019 was the first time that there was any really meaningful amendments to and changes or updates to the Charter Schools Act. It dealt with a bunch of procedural issues and other things around charter school petition review, petitions, revocation, and kind of acknowledged that it expanded the hearing timelines associated with that procedure. So it's really been the same for, it was the same for 20 years almost, and then, or actually it's 30 years. And then we've now been operating under the new provisions for the last few years. I did want to sort of preface this also with the fact that although it's not in the Education Code anywhere, there's really what's been recognized as two different types of charter schools. One would be dependent charter schools, and those are charter schools which are initiated by the school districts themselves. So school districts, those are their own schools. You as a board can present a charter petition and approve a charter school, which would then be exempt from most of the regular education code provisions related to schools. You would be the board for that charter school and operate it as a school of the district, but as a charter school. The other method of charter school initiation would be as an independent charter school, and that's parents or community members or even other teachers who want to submit a petition and run an independent school. Generally, those have their own boards and governance structures, and they are the ones responsible for the day-to-day operations. The district in that situation is the authorizer. And as you'll see in the slides, the authorizing local educational agency, or LEA, which then you have oversight responsibilities. What I want to talk about today, and I'll go through this as quickly as possible in the interest of your long agenda, but really I'm going to go an overview of petition review and action on those petitions, as well as what districts' obligations are for oversight of charter schools. I'll talk a little bit about what the charter schools' obligations are, and then reference a couple of miscellaneous issues there's just a whole heck of a lot you can imagine in the charter schools realm to talk about, and I focus this mainly on petitions itself and oversight. So there's basically three key things three key actions that the school district needs to be cognizant of when it receives a charter school petition. And that is, initially, you need to hold a public hearing within 60 days of the district's receipt of the petition itself. It's 60 calendar days, so the clock starts the minute that petition is actually delivered to the school district. That was clarified in AB 1505, so that the timelines, everybody's operating on the same understanding of when that 60-day timeline occurs. It used to be that public hearing had to happen within 30 days, but in 2019, that was extended to 60 days. The next, I guess, piece in the timeline would be for formal action, the staff and the board need to publish to the public at least 15 days before the board meeting at which it's going to take action on the charter petition. It needs to publish the staff recommendations regarding the petition itself and whether that's to approve or deny and the basis for that recommendation. And then the final action, which has to happen within 90 days of receipt of the petition, is the board needs to take action to either approve or deny the charter school petition. That 90-day timeline can be extended with agreement of the charter school petitioners, but if you don't get agreement with the petitioners to extend that timeline, you need to act within that 90-day period. What does the charter petition have to include? The Education Code 47605 is very long. It's multiple pages in the Education Code, but generally it has to include signatures of petitioners, whether those are students or teachers, parents and guardians of students or teachers. There's a host of affirmations. There are 15 specific elements, which I'll go through, as well as various declarations by the petitioners regarding compliance with laws, representation of employees, whether they'll be part of the state retirement systems or Social Security, and then there's additional provisions requiring very detailed financial documents, including first year budget, budget projections for 3 years, cash flow analysis, and all of those related issues. Getting back to the signatures, one of the first things when you get a petition you're going to be looking at is whether or not it has a sufficient number of signatures. And it's an interplay. The petition should be articulating how many students the charter school anticipates serving in the first year of operation. And the petition needs to have at least 50% of that number represented by signatures of parents or guardians who are meaningfully interested in having their child attend that charter school. And the other alternative would be 50% of the number of teachers that the charter school would intend to employ in that first year of operation. It's difficult sometimes, but you can, in fact, audit and review and should look at those petition signatures if it's supported, whether by teachers or by parents and guardians. Oftentimes, those petitions may include signatures of folks who are not parents or guardians, and you'd want to just look at that as to whether or not you have anybody notably signing that who you know does not fall into the category of a parent or guardian of a child.
Do the teachers have to be credentialed?
Yes. So for all the core subjects, they do need to be credentialed. So any of the math, science, English language arts, social studies, physical education, the law did change to require those credentials for charter school teachers. And notably on the teacher side, one of the things to look at, particularly in petitions where the petitioner is a charter school management organization who operates multiple charter schools, is that the teacher signatures aren't teachers in one of the other charter schools necessarily. Because at that point then there's a question as to whether or not, if they're employed and working in another existing charter school, whether they are actually, and it's within the same CMO, whether they're going to be whether they're going to meaningfully be intended to teach in this new school. So there are some, it's not just checking boxes necessarily. I think you do need to, and I recommend looking at the charter petition itself to make sure that that the intent of the law is borne out by exactly what's included. So the 15 required elements, I can read through them, but I have them all on the slides here. Main considerations and what you're going to want to look for, or your staff is going to want to look for in terms of a comprehensive petition, are things like, what are the measurable pupil outcomes that are being sought by the charter school? How are they going to measure student progress? How's the school structured? Is there, have they included an organizational chart? Again, credentialing and qualifications of their teachers and their administrators. You're going to want to look to see whether or not there's comprehensive health and safety procedures, because at the end of the day, this is literally the blueprint for an entire school district. What could be a single school district. So soups to nuts, you're going to need to see everything from their complaint procedures, how they're going to address disputes with the district if they're authorized. How are they going to serve English language learners? How are they going to address special education? Literally everything that goes into the operations of a school district should be encapsulated in this petition, and it's actually required by law. One of the other things that's required would be admissions policies and preferences. Generally, charter school petitions include certain preferences in terms of who would get in if you get more applicants than there are proposed spaces within grade levels. And that requires another component of the public hearing process, that those admission processes do need to be subject to actually public input at one of your board meetings. You're going to want to be looking for things that may be, have a discriminatory impact or improperly prioritize certain students over others. So it is a comprehensive analysis. And you want to make sure, I think, that the programs themselves that are developed don't inadvertently, or discriminate against students with disabilities, those that are academically low achieving, English learners, potentially neglected or delinquent students, homeless, because in the in the aspirational language in the education code, charter schools there is a preference for serving students who are underserved and low performing. So you're going to want to be looking at what they're doing in that realm. As to some of the other financial pieces of the required elements, they need to spell out what they're going to do in terms of provision for financial audits, and then what they're going to do in terms of if the charter school were to wrap up and close, whether voluntarily, involuntarily, there should be wrap-up procedures about how assets are distributed, and notifications to parents, notifications to guardians, and what their students' enrollment options are for public school. Okay. In addition, any charter school petition has to include information regarding what that charter school or how that charter school may impact the district that it's petitioning to establish, to authorize it. That includes facilities implications, administrative services, liability issues, specifically where it's going to locate. Is it going to locate, in a strip mall? Is it planning to locate in a church? Is it planning to locate in a district school? And request facilities under Prop 39. They need to spell out how they're going to handle all their back-end administrative services, whether they're going to do it with their own staff, whether they're going to, outsource that to a third-party vendor, whether they anticipate wanting to purchase those services from the district. You're going to want to look at, the liability issues. Are they, what's the indemnification language so that the district is protected in the event that something goes wrong at the charter school. And again, as I mentioned, they are specifically required to have a full first-year budget, as well as 3 years of financial projections in cash flow. You're going to want to be looking specifically at on those financial documents. Are they relying on soft money? Where do they have startup capital? How are they going to be? How do they anticipate buying all the things they need for first-year operations? Do they have cash available or lines of credit? And what are the terms around those things? So your staff in going through the charter petition is really going to have to look at, even if they say something, does it appear to be reasonable that this is something that they can do? What are the assumptions they're using for their budget projections? We all know under the local control funding formula that the per pupil base grants differ between the grade spans. So when you're looking at the financials as to what they're anticipating in the way of revenue based on their enrollment, how are they making assumptions, and on what basis are they making assumptions around numbers at each of the grade spans, whether or not, what do they anticipate in the way of unduplicated pupil percentages within those strands, and any supplemental or concentration money that they might be entitled to. You are looking at very extraordinary level of detail on the financial side, because generally, that seems to be one of the places where we see in our practice, some struggles. Managing cash flow, managing revenues, particularly with, how volatile things can be from the state, and how we get late information about revenues, what we can be entitled to. Those are things that are going to be critical to the analysis of any charter school petition. I have this on here. They have to also make very specific affirmations, assurances to the school board that they will be non-sectarian, that they can't charge tuition, it must be discrimination-free, that they're going to adhere to all the non-discrimination laws in California as well as federal, and that they accept all takers within the numbers that they've allocated. On the tuition piece, I just want to point out there was an ACLU report from a few years ago around issues with charter schools, one of them being required parent or guardian service hours and other types of things. So you need to look very carefully in terms of what the expectations are around for parents and guardians, if any, in the charter schools. Most have fixed those, and they're not requirements anymore, they're recommendations, but you're going to want to look to see whether or not they can fulfill a program, the program aspirations, if in fact nobody actually volunteers. So it does become a bit holistic.
Is there a difference between then, on those requirements between private school and charter school? Because the private is run so differently than the charters?
So charter schools are public schools.
Okay.
So private schools can charge tuition, make people, mop floors and cut trees and do all those fun things, or volunteer in classrooms. But charter schools, since they are part of the public school system, cannot require, they can't require donations, they can't require money, they can't require time for anyone,
So that's
any
the big
parents.
difference between the
So
two.
that's the huge, yes, that's the huge difference.
Thank you.
And then I already mentioned the fact that if in fact they get more applicants than there are slots to fill, they need to follow their admissions policies and their preferences and how that's going to play out. You need to look at and see if really what it does is it provides an opportunity simply for let's say in another charter school situation I had where, given the preferences, basically all the slots would be filled by these founding and sort of initial support families, which would essentially, because of the numbers, exempted anybody else who wasn't essentially had signed on as a quote unquote initial supporter. So, you want to look to make sure that that those admissions preferences and the enrollment stuff is really actually providing an opportunity for public school choice.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
Across the river, there's a Marysville Charter for the Arts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if they have a specialization like that, is it legal or whatever for kids to have to audition to get in? Or,
yeah, it's there's definitely been the State Board of Education has definitely been pro-charter for the past many years, and so some of those questions about auditioning or being
if it's for a science
academically, excelling, like let's say a GATE program or something like that, there's some tension. Nobody has outright said it's flat illegal to do that. There's a very high profile arts program, charter school down in Southern California that to this day still has audition requirements and has not been deemed to be in violation of the Charter Schools Act because it's part and parcel of its full program, and they've cast it as non-discriminatory, even though some have made arguments around impacts on students with disabilities.
That charter school did go, there was a court hearing on it and they prevailed.
Yeah. So the charter school did, because of the the attack was on essentially that this had a discriminatory impact on various groups, protected groups. So no, nobody's found those to be illegal, and they are permitted under the law.
Well, in that situation, it depended upon what program they were coming into. It's an arts, a charter school, but they also have the regular classes, which auditioning is not required.
Mm-hmm.
So
They
that's how
had
they got around it.
Right, they had a very, it's going to be fact-based on whatever the individual charter school. I think I led with it. It depends on the program and how their program design is. Originally, I think that charter school was purely audition only, and then they expanded to include the other non-audition track to address some of those issues.
Because they had to meet all the curriculum issues.
Mm-hmm. Correct. So Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. And so when you get to the point of board action, so at this point you would have, the staff will have gone through the petition with a fine-tooth comb and developed recommendations. And if there was a recommendation to deny the charter petition, it would have to include written factual findings in one of the specific areas spelled out in the education code. So you don't have unfettered ability to deny on any basis. It could only be on the authorized basis in the education code, and that would be that they don't have enough of the correct signatures. They're missing key affirmations or declarations. The other two would be, or the key ones about, there's a finding it's an unsound educational program, or that the petitioners are demonstrably unlikely to successfully implement the proposed program. You also get into the petition lacking comprehensive descriptions of all of the required elements of any petition. And then there's two more. One is about they're unlikely to serve the interests of the entire community in which they're intending to operate. And that's where the new provision from AB 1505 and 1507 includes the ability for authorizers to consider the fiscal impact of the proposed charter school on the authorizing school district. And that dovetails with that the district's not positioned to absorb the fiscal impact of the proposed charter school. In the case of the fiscal impact analysis, the way the legislature crafted that was that if the district would have a qualified or a negative budget or was one of the current 4 districts in state receivership, there's a rebuttable presumption then that's established that the district is not in a position to absorb the financial impact of the charter school, and then it goes back to the charter school then to essentially provide evidence, argument that in fact the district can. No, they're actually the State Board of Education is in August with one of the districts that we represent actually going to consider the issue of fiscal impact. Currently, there's a charter school petition that Vallejo Unified has, they denied, the county office also denied because they're still under state receivership. And so the analysis of whether or not that's actually sufficient in and of itself for the board to make a denial finding is going to go before the state board. We'll see how that goes. But you all are in good shape here in Yuba City, so that is not necessarily something that will be front and center on anything that you might be proposing as the way of staff findings. So you will have those 15 days posted, the staff recommendations. You would have also specific findings of fact to support those findings. And you would then have to have your meeting, which is agendized as a public hearing. The law requires that, and this was silent before 2019, that the petitioners have to be given an equal amount of time and the same access to procedures, let's say technology, and the ability to present to the board their evidence, their testimony related to the staff findings. This becomes a new issue if the recommendation is to approve generally. It usually is if the situations where there's a recommendation to deny. The public hearing doesn't have any specific time limits or minimum requirements. It's equal opportunity to present. And once that public hearing is closed, then the matter comes back to the board for your discussion and then consideration of recommendations and any motions on the petition.
Does the board should they consider the number of charter schools that are already in their district?
It isn't a finding, it isn't one of the authorized bases for denial. But it might come as part and parcel of fiscal
We have
impacts.
two already.
Mhm. Yeah, there's no statutory or other legislative authorization to consider that you've got 13 charter
Yeah,
schools.
the only reason I was asking is because of the financial impact
Mhm.
when you start to get that many charter schools in a district that, we're not a large district.
Right. And, there's a natural tension in the law around this, which is, and, whether this was originally intended or not, charter schools becomes they compete with the regular district for enrollment in their schools, and the argument from the charter school side would be that, this fosters creativity, innovation, and also improvement in the regular public schools as well, to incentivize students to stay within your regular school district as opposed to making a charter school choice. But, that's the line that is, from CCSA and the charter schools advocates is the way they're positing it. But they do, as far as pulling enrollment off, they do have impacts, in terms of, potential school closures, compaction, all those kinds of issues.
Does the national teacher shortage weigh into this? Are they going to be able to stop it?
Actually, I think that's a great question because I think it does. But it does in the sense of the analysis of whether they'll be demonstrably likely or unlikely to be able to successfully implement their program. If they're looking at if you're getting a petition that presents a program that requires a whole host of single subject specialized teachers, and that there's nobody has the ability to find those folks with the credentials to be teaching, there may be a significant question in the board's mind as to whether they're actually going to be able to pull that program off. So that's why it's very holistic. I mean, you're looking at, it's not just the four corners of that petition that you're looking at. You're considering that in the totality of the circumstances facing you, one of them being, the availability for teachers and staff. Another is also, is there enough money to actually fund this fantastical program and the computers and the one-to-one technology and everything that they need, as well as be able to adhere to the requirements to provide school lunches and meals to students every day. All those things will come into play in terms of analyzing the ability for that charter school to actually work.
If the petitioners are saying something in the community different than what they've represented in their petition, are you allowed to consider that in your decision-making process?
You mean in terms of like public representations about what they're doing, or
yes,
what do you
their
really
plans.
mean? Like, do you have an example?
Like potentially who their target community is, their admissions policies, their plans regarding the public school district, things like that. Governance structure, just how things are going to be ran there. If they're out flyering saying one thing, but their petition checks all the boxes, are you allowed to consider what they're saying?
Absolutely. If they're publishing and they're having let's say they're having community meetings or other, living room chats or coffee chats or whatever, discussing, what's going on, and you actually have evidence that representatives of the charter school petitioners are saying something very different than what's presented in the charter petition, then that would be something I think relevant to the analysis, and which may be very appropriate in connection with findings.
Would that just be fraud?
Well, I don't know if it would be legal fraud.
No, maybe. It seems like that should be enough of a basis to basically deny it or at least send it back.
Mm-hmm. Well, it would certainly call into question whether or not they're going to implement the program that they've presented. I think if there's evidence, external evidence to show that they have no intention of doing this.
Right.
You can make a finding within the education code around what they are going to be able to do.
I'm gonna ask that you continue
Yeah.
to move on because we've got
Sure.
a lot of others.
And I'm pretty much at the very end. So, we touched about unsound educational program, and demonstrably unlikely. And again, that's yes, you can and should do outside research around your petitioners and their programs. You also want to look at if they're running other schools, what is the experience with those other schools? How are they doing? Are they financially viable? Are they seeing, the appropriate academic growth that they're projecting? What is their track record? Looking at the CVs of the folks who intend to be running the school. Do they have any experience in actually running a school or not? I have a petition where the petitioners included folks who had zero expertise in finance and fiscal back-end services, and yet these individuals were going to be responsible fully as the CBO of the charter school, which created some very significant questions. There are a few things I just want to point out. The district cannot base its denial on, and that would be related to high special education costs. I will just anecdotally say that the petition that you have in front of you proposes to be its own LEA for special education, so this wouldn't necessarily that finding wouldn't be appropriate in your instance because they are proposing to cover their own special education costs. It wouldn't be borne by the district, but generally the default in the law is that a charter school is a school of the district for special education purposes, and it's the district that has the responsibility to provide FAPE and all of the related services related to implementing student IEPs.
Can they change that?
Can they change that?
Let's assume that we grant the petition. Can they change the fiscal responsibility of special ed back onto the district?
So that would be a material revision that would then come to you and, as to if you were approving a petition based on the representation that they would be their own LEA, then if they cannot just unilaterally flip back and say, oh, gotcha, we can't, the SELVA won't let us in or whatever, and now you need to pay for everything. Yeah, that would have to go through essentially what's a menu petition process with a material revision. And then some of the other things that have come up in question, this is based on questions that we've received in the past, is that, unless it's the fiscal impact piece under AB 1505, the fiscal impact generally is not something districts were allowed to solely base their denial reasons on. Charter schools that want to access, let's say, closed schools or district facilities, that is an entitlement if they meet requirements in the education code for where they want to operate. So you can't deny if they're just because they're saying they want to use your facilities, and obviously you can't deny just because you don't like them. It has to be grounded in actual factual findings and on authorized basis.
But the greatest impact is the fiscal impact.
Generally.
The loss of ADA.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just amazing that we can't consider that because it could get to the point where if they pull enough of our students, we could be faced with closing schools. So
it's a very nuanced and delicate analysis and impact analysis because you're going to be looking at in terms of the pull and just the general loss of ADA. If it looks like
run schools.
Yeah, but if you're going to have to actually, if you're not actually able to operate programs because you're down to 2 kids or something that doesn't become viable, those are all pieces that you're going to be looking at. Can you still run your schools? Because you still have an obligation to operate.
So if this board were to approve a petition, and that's one of the impacts that it has, where does that put our relationship with the charter school?
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't know until it begins to operate the true fiscal impact it's going to have on our budget.
Well, I think what it ends up doing is it challenges the school district to figure out exactly why students are, resident students, because this would only be as to students within your territorial jurisdiction, because they can pull from anywhere.
Sure.
Why they're choosing why they're choosing to go to a charter school in lieu of programs in Yuba City. I mean,
Better promises.
Yep, but thankfully you have a board and a strong superintendent who hopefully can be the one who champions, the high quality of your programs and the innovative things you're looking at in terms of furniture, classroom settings, all those kinds of things. But it is the perennial challenge and has been since the Charter Schools Act was enacted.
I'm worried about the use of district facilities because, we're already busting at the seams as it is, and if they come in and say, we want to use your facilities, what do we do if we don't have them?
You have to find them, is the short answer. That's an entirely additional amount of time for a presentation, and as I noted in the end, but under Prop 39, if they have at least 80 in-district students, a charter school has the right to request facilities for those students because under the concept or the assumption that you would have had to house those students yourself, so you must have at least room for those students. And school districts have been required to essentially parse out part of campuses and have split campuses if they don't have open facilities. There's the ability to get creative with charter schools and provide, essentially maybe financial support for in lieu of facilities on district premises. Oakland was working deals and other districts have worked deals where they leased, other kinds of commercial space to house the charter schools if they didn't have the space available for them. So the short answer is that for in-district kids, you are going to have to provide them because they are part of this public school system.
There's some portables across the parking lot. Scott told me might be opening up.
And I'll get into the fact that they have to be substantially equivalent in terms of condition. So I don't know about that. I don't know about that, but I'll just go through the end of this really quickly. If there's a denial at the local level, at the school district level, charter schools have the right to appeal that decision to the County Board of Education, who then has a de novo standard, meaning whatever you did here means nothing to them. They don't have to give any deference to your decision, and the county board gets to decide whether or not to approve or deny the petition itself. They become the authorizer with oversight responsibilities, but the district still retains all of the obligations with regard to facilities, and unfortunately will also be the one that gets the phone calls for unhappy parents because, let's be clear, generally parents don't really know the difference in terms of separation of responsibility and who do you call when you're upset about what's happening and discipline and other things. So there's that component. And so you're going to also want to be looking at, what is the relative likelihood that the county board would approve a petition that you may deny because as the authorizer, the county board would be the sole entity with the ability to demand, make cure and correct demands and initiate revocation proceedings if there are issues with the charter school and make findings. So they're your kids, potentially in your facilities, but you don't have, essentially that authority to step in with regard to operations if in the district's judgment things are going sideways, and that can be an awfully big challenge that many districts have faced. If the county board were to deny, also to uphold the denial, there is an ability to appeal to the state. Prior to 2019 and AB 1505, the state was in the business of authorizing charter schools. They are now out of the business of chartering schools. And so what ends up happening is that the denial review, the state board looks at it from an abuse of discretion standard. So there is deference to the decisions at the county and the district level. If the state board decides that there has been an abuse of discretion, what they will do is they don't send it back for review again. They order it chartered, and they get to pick, and they decide unilaterally whether or not it's going to be the county or the district, which is the authorizer. So, yeah, that's the appeals process that would be relative to you. I've gone in here and talked about just generally on district oversight responsibilities. If you do end up, if you have charter schools, so you should be relatively familiar with the obligations. The Ed Code is really a floor and minimum standards for oversight to hopefully prevent possible bleed over in liability. Should the charter school get into trouble and be sued, as long as the district's complying with its minimum obligations for oversight, then it will not be responsible for the debts and liabilities of the charter school. But again, I think it's minimum standards, and from what the ACLU and others have put out there, it seems unfair, but even with the errors, abuses, and other things in charter schools, publicly they're saying it seems to be throwing the blame back on the districts for those things, because accusing the districts of not sufficiently overseeing when they're not built. You are not staffed or built for, essentially that extra work. You do get the ability to collect up to 1% of the charter school's revenue for actual costs of oversight, but you're going to need, but again, that you're going to need to manage that in terms of whether or not, if it's a small charter school, is that really going to cover your personnel costs for oversight, or is 1% of revenue going to be more than enough? In which case, you want to document what your oversight costs and activities are, so that you're properly billing back. The charter schools there's charter school obligations as well. It's not all on you. They do need to respond to reasonable inquiries of the authorizing LEA. For financial information regarding things like complaints, how the charter school is resolved and investigated complaints. They have to provide all their legally required reports. They're subject to Lcat, the budget development process, interim financial reporting. They are required to, they're subject to the Public Records Act, they're subject to the Brown Act, they're subject to the conflict of interest laws. So they do have to operate now. It's been settled very clearly in the same manner that school boards do in school districts on those transparency laws.
Oh, but they're trying to get around something, let me tell you.
I already spoke to special education. If there's questions, we can, I can certainly provide greater information. We talked about the default being as a school of the district, but the charter school has the ability to petition as its own LEA, in which case then it would be a member of the SELPA and get its money directly from the SELPA, consistent with the local plan, and you're out of the business of the charter schools' special education compliance issues. Again, just in closing, there's a whole body and a whole presentation on Proposition 39 and charter school facilities, as well as the procedures around revocation and non-renewal of charters. And that's not something, I didn't add all that in. That's more than what we've got time for. But I'm certainly happy to provide additional information on any of those things and those topics to the extent that's of interest and need for the board. I think we handled questions as we went along, and President Riley, I will defer, and hopefully if there's any questions, you can please give them to...
If you have any questions, I would ask that you discuss those with the superintendent and submit them and not do it at this time. We're way behind. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. All right. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Okay, board, the next item is the consent agenda. Is there any item?
I was just saying that you all starts at
It's on, it's fine. Make a motion that we approve the
Well,
consent.
let me ask, is there anyone that wants any item on the consent agenda taken separately? Okay, thank you, Mary.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Member Betticaboli and a second by Member Tackard to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on to action items, student cases.
I make a motion that we approve the student cases as discussed in closed session.
I'll make a second on that.
We have a motion and a second to approve the student cases as was discussed in closed session. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Second reading of the Yuba City Unified School District Strategic Plan.
Yes, thank you. I bring forward for a second reading and recommendation for approval, the strategic plan along with the board's goals for the district, their priority areas. I did receive some feedback from board member in those changes, and I appreciate that. Is there anything else the board would like to discuss?
Discussion.
Second read and
Shelley.
There was, just in our second objective, or second priority, which is college center career pathway, I don't really see as much on here that shows that we're supporting students who are not choosing to attend an academic post-secondary education as I'd like to see. Does that make sense?
I understand. So there is in 2, there's CTE courses, outcome 5 related to career interests, 6 post-secondary CT programs. So specifically what might be.
I'm looking for something like a partnership with people where we can have kids with in like internship or a apprenticeship or things that would not necessarily mean they need to go to the junior college, and that they could be pursuing something that would lead to gainful employment upon graduation from high school.
So that's maybe what.
Maybe I'm not seeing.
Well, I think where you may be under the metrics under 3.1, measured by district community classrooms and internship partnerships. So maybe you were specifically, so internships referring to, we have kids that participate in an auto internship with some of the local auto dealers. So is that what you're referencing?
Yeah, maybe so.
Okay, so we do have that, and it's part of our Perkins grant that we have to report on. So that would be a metrics that we are increasing the number of internships of students who are coming out of our CTE programs into internships with our local businesses.
Okay, but internships while they're in high school?
Yes. Okay. They're doing them.
It's not just the automobile one, there's more.
Yes,
Okay.
and Martin could come and do a presentation.
That's okay, I was just curious,
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure there's more than one.
Yes. So that's one of the things we've been working on, is those internships.
When it says the district will retain a qualified consultant to update the current facilities master plan by July 2023, does that mean they'll complete it by July 2023 or will retain it by July 2023?
Well, the goal is to have it done by July 2023, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that wasn't, we'll hire someone by July 2023.
No, actually, since you asked, we just received responses on our request for proposals for that, so we'll be going through those and interviewing the folks there to just make a selection here shortly.
Can I ask, and maybe this is a suggestion, please tell me if I'm overstepping, on number 4 where it's talking about special education and gate, some of these expected outcomes, I kind of feel like could benefit special ed as well, like number 5, for example, increasing the number of professional and development opportunities to the teachers. I think it's talking about the gifted students. If we can maybe word it to include and special ed.
Absolutely. So I can make that change.
Are we currently doing gate certification training?
We stopped with what's that thing called, with the pandemic and COVID, so we stopped, but there were some
We did have it
online.
this year. We had it this year. And then we had the teachers this year.
I just remember being the only high school.
Yeah.
And then the other question, if maybe you guys can clarify a little bit for number 1 and 2 on number 4, for special education, and for the outcome, and then also just like the metric. Can you kind of explain, like, I understand increasing measurement and accountability, maybe just number 1, that particular one, increasing the measurement and accountability for students receiving specific supports, services, including students on IEPs. How does the state performance plan indicators, like, how does that work?
So they come in and they audit our IEPs, and then they make, so there's a metrics, I'm not as familiar, this is gone. But they come in and they audit our IEPs, and they also, I think, we talk to parents regarding the implementation, and then there's a scale by which we're assessed.
Or not?
Yes.
So I think one of the things that Dream, you and I talked about, maybe what I had mentioned earlier as far as including SPED on number 5, might be with number 1 on the accountability piece. I think it was we had talked about alignment to get everyone on the same page,
Which would
address the accountability. Is that?
And perhaps that's under the professional development.
Oh, okay.
Because that would be one of the things I know Director Gavitt does, is that she does the PD in order to be in compliance, so she works with staff. So that would be something that we would include when we talk about professional development.
Okay. And I have one last question on number 6.
Goal 6?
Yeah, the alternative optional educational programs. Are we actually moving forward with looking at things, I don't know, sometimes it's called a tweener school, sometimes it's called all kinds of things. For students who have not shown to be successful in middle school and then promote automatically to high school, and they're failing every single class as freshmen. So, that's a real concern. It really affects, all kinds of things.
Yes.
Emotional well-being to graduation rates.
That is, so outcome number 1 is to explore that alternative program, and that was for the tweener school. So it's really that whole issue regarding the middle to high school transition. So that would be outcome number 1.
Right, so that means we're actually gonna be working on this.
Right, so we actually have a plan that is a design of the school, but now it really was, if we're gonna move forward with that, the program description and the requirements for those students to be in that program, but then additionally will be is the fiscal ability for the board to then look at because I think it's a $6 million to $7 million project.
Yeah.
And so that's, where will we get $6 or $7 million to do it?
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you.
And during my last question, it kind of coincides with this. I believe it was the last board meeting, or maybe the board meeting before that. I think I brought up kind of a clarification point of our board priorities, and then what piece of the pie we were given, like a picture or visual that says that this is how much is in Fund 17, it's going to eventually go into Fund 14. Like the allocation, like how much of the pie can we potentially designate to each of those? Would that be after we approve this?
Right, so one of the things I think what you're asking, I think I need to think through is, how are these things being funded presently? So some things are being funded with Lcat, some are in the general fund. So what you're asking is, how are we currently funding these? And do we need to also allocate additional resources to the board?
Correct, the additional resources part.
So that
specifically is what I'm asking.
Yeah, so what we would want to do is also, when we bring you an update, because we're going to bring an update, is to also let you know what the funding allocations are. And if there's a need for more money.
I would think some of it would be very hard because a lot of the stuff overlaps.
It does, but,
You're not gonna be able to have a clear pie of what.
well, it won't be a pie, but we can give you the resources in terms of where things are funded. Generally,
We could generally.
that's why I said,
Generally,
think
that's
about
gonna
it.
be so much overwhelming.
Well,
Scott's over there cringing.
Actually, Laura's cringing.
I would cringe if you asked me to do that.
No, what I'm specifically asking is like, with the new caps on Fund 17, how we're gonna move some of the money that we have to figure out what the use is going to be for. That specifically is what I'm, not necessarily like, where's the funding coming for PDs? I know that Pam has a grant that.
Right, so what
Can
the
you
process would go, what we would do, Jasmine, through the process would be is as we're going through these outcomes and priorities, we move along and we say, if there's necessary money, do we need to come to the board because there aren't any funds to build a new school for the alternative school for our middle school. It's a big project. There isn't any funding sources. It's one of your top priorities. And so that would be something that would come forward.
Well, and just rationale wise, I mean, we do have quite a, even with our reduction in how many board priorities, we still have a lot. I don't want it to seem like, in my opinion, my thought process, I don't want it to be like, oh, we have 16 board priorities, but number 16 was just listed on there. All it needed was $50,000. We still don't do anything to support that. Do you know what I mean? That's just kind of my rationale for that. Thank you.
So you're going to suggest, I've noted the one line change to the additional special education for PD. With that change, we'll consider.
I make a motion that we make the change with that we approve it with the changes stated.
Second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 11C, Expanded Learning Opportunities Program.
Okay. Good evening. With this plan, there is a lot of education code attached to it. So I want to go through and talk about some of those pieces so you see how we're addressing each one of those. The total funding for this program, Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, is additional funding that we have received in order to expand our students' opportunities. It's part of that American Rescue Plan so that parents have an opportunity to get back to work to the degree possible. So with ELOP, the additional funding that we have for this year, we see is almost $3.2 million attached now, blended with our ACES funds that were already 1.9. So now we have a $5 million after-school program, which will now be more of a before and after-school program that we'll address as we move through. Part of the requirement is when you blend these programs is that you have to combine the laws and rules for both. ACES is federal funding, ELOP is state funding, so you have to kind of blend that. ELOP requires, both ELOP and ACES say that we need to at least provide 175 days per year of opportunity for students. However, we will be providing all 180 days. In terms of the number of hours, ELOP says 9 hours per day. However, ACES requires that you stay open until at least 6 p.m. So if we're providing some of that before school care to support the community need and start open up at 7 so that families have or students have from 7 to 8 to have care on campus before school starts. That varies a little bit by school site. That means we will have a program available from 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. for students. And that's part of the idea. We also are required through ELOP to have 30 non-school days provided for care. That can be all 30 in the summer, like we have provided this summer specific to enrichment only, intercession. So we have 9 hours during this summer to provide. Next year, as we move on, we might survey the parents that are participating in the program and see if they might prefer less time in the summer and use some intercession period, like the February or spring break. That might be more helpful, but those are all options that we can explore. We just have to have 30 extra days provided. School sites have to be prioritized based on need. However, we are providing the program at every school site, so that won't be necessary. Schools, we have to provide the program for all transitional kindergarten families that are interested. Part of this is to create no barrier for students to families that want their child to participate in TK. We don't want families that have their children in preschool that have the full day care, then to not consider the new TK program. So we have to provide that after school care for TK families. And then in addition to that, we have to provide it at a 10-to-1 ratio so that students have all of that required supervision. And that applies not only to TK, but also kindergarten, which is new this year. That new requirement to only have 10-to-1 for kindergarten is new.
What was it before?
It was 20-to-1. And 20-to-1 is still the requirement for ACES and ELOP for your other grade levels. It's all 20-to-1 across the board. The exception is TK and kinder. Okay, now the LAs must serve all students based on capacity. So what we are shooting for right now is at least 30% of our students having the opportunity based on what we feel like is that we can reasonably staff moving into next year. But with ACES, you have a lot of specific requirements that you prioritize in order for students to participate. With the ELOP funds, it really becomes first come, first serve. Any family is able to participate in this program. This is a new a change that will have an impact on our staffing. Staff members have to meet the minimum qualifications of being an instructional aide. So this will change those requirements for many of our staff, and that will be an adjustment that we will need to address. We will be subject to audit like we are with every kind of grant funding and support that we have. The snacks, we will have snacks and meals provided throughout the program based on the number of hours students are participating, and they will meet all of the federal nutrition standards. There are multiple elements with regard to the program in that with ELOP, you're required to have both an educational and a enrichment piece throughout every day of the program. That is similar to ACES, but with ACES, in addition, you have to provide a recreational opportunity as well. So every student is eligible to participate if a district, based on the need and they have staffing, you can charge families fees. We do not plan to do that, but if we did over time end up in a situation where we had to charge fees, you could not charge fees to students that meet the low income or homeless foster criteria. Okay, so like I mentioned, these are a combined program. With regard to how we have to address it, you have to adhere to the most restrictive requirements. The example of that is being open till 6 and being open 9 hours. The actual reality of that means we're open 11 hours because before school care, we know at many of our schools is really important. So our day will be very long and not unusual for before and after school programs across districts. We will serve all 180 days. We will do a combination of summer or intercession for those 30 days, depending on the needs of the participants. We'll be open till 6, and our program will support instruction, homework support, recreation, and enrichment. Any questions?
Yeah, you need a motion to approve this.
Yes, I do, please.
I'd like to make a motion to approve item 11C.
I'll second. We have a motion by Mr. Packard and a second by Mr. Russell to approve. All those in favor? Aye. It's better for Boley had to leave, so. Okay, the next item is the 11D, approval of the 2023 local Lcat.
We addressed this in the public hearing last week and did the presentation. Today, we just need a decision to approve so that we can set funding for next year.
Board, do you have questions? Hearing none.
Motion to approve the LCAP for 2022.
I'll second it.
That's 2022 and 2023. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Instead Foley is absent. 11E,
So,
adoption of the proposed budget.
Similar to the LCAP, this is presented at the last board meeting. The only thing that I will state is that there is an update to the budget that was announced this week, and we will incorporate those changes at the 45-day revise in August, and essentially that's the changes to the revenues. This budget included an increase of 10% to the local football funding formula, and the revised the budget that looks like it will pass is a 13% increase to that local football funding formula.
Are there any questions from the board? May I have a motion to approve?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 11F, Ready Professional Development.
iReady is our assessment program for kindergarten through 8th grade. This is specifically the professional development to support staff with this program through the year.
Questions, board?
My only question is we've had iReady for a little while, haven't we?
We got iReady last year because we had to have an assessment program in lieu of the CASP.
Okay.
So we've been working with it about a year and a half now.
So with CASP,
We had to have we continue to require a district assessment program. We had to have something specific to use in lieu of CASP for that year.
right?
That doesn't mean we don't continue to need a district-wide assessment program that we can use to determine student needs. iReady is a standards-based program. It helps teachers know areas in which students are needing more support that are based on specific standards that they're struggling with.
So Kim, it's essentially it's taking place of the math district assessment that would be given twice a year.
Yes, this is the district math assessment, district language arts assessment.
Okay, so it's in place of a one that's created by the district. It's not on top of it.
It's not on top of
Other questions? We have a vote.
I'd like to accept some of the three as presented.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Make a second on the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Laura, we had, was pretty opposed.
Thank you.
11G, I-Ready Comprehensive Assessment and Instruction Program.
Right, this goes with the previous, this is for the actual program, the online resource. Previous one is the professional development support for that.
We have questions?
I just think it's very expensive when that money could be used for our teachers to develop a district-wide assessment that would be more authentic to our students and our district.
I can see one of the pros. I do hear what you're saying, Shelley. I worked with the middle school for the math component, worked with Danny Owens and Erin Jenkins during that time. For the math assessment specifically, we worked for the district, and there were challenges in developing one themselves. I think maybe one of the positives, but doesn't mean that it answers all the questions, is the I guess the alignment to curriculum, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe it gives better data, more comprehensive data, because it's standardized. It was a lot of times when you would roll out those district assessments, it would be that there's glitches or there's things that are wrong, and then now you've given it to the entire 7th grade, and now there's like problems that didn't go through, and then when the Scantron, the little.
And I understand that. I've also heard that there are those types of glitches with this program as well, so.
Gotcha. This I-Ready is nationally normed and state normed, and it's specific to the content standards. What makes it important to use an assessment tool like this is when you're developing something with a local focus, you don't always have meet the expectations for your end of year level of rigor and depth of understanding. You have just the focus on where, the teacher's expectation maybe for where those students should be, not the true level of expectation, like end of year expectation that the state has. It becomes really important for everyone to understand what that looks like, and because when we take the CASP, one of the biggest things that you'll hear when we do feedback and we talk about those pieces and look at that data is there's just not that understanding of the level of expectation that standard was going to be addressed. So you can look at a state standard and say, okay, I understand students in 3rd grade need to understand multiplication, but to what level? And I'm not talking about, 5 plus 5 versus 9 or 9 times 9. It's really understanding how those questions could be asked and the complexity of understanding for those questions. So the multiple layers. So that's why it's important to have a nationally normed tool that addresses our standards.
Well, I do think it is too expensive because I think schools get charged too much for everything because places know you can't go anywhere else and they take advantage of government regulations on that. It also provides personalized instruction. It's not just the assessment. So it is an effective tool for teachers. From what I've heard, especially this year with just how crazy things were getting with COVID, a lot of the times with being able to offer this as a consistent resource to students, and it does offer personalized instruction that they can jump in based off their assessment. There are glitches with everything, yes, but it was a pretty successful tool.
Yeah, can I ask one last question compared to what you're talking there an option through the program to only assess up to a certain standard because the teachers didn't go up to that, haven't covered that standard yet? You know, pacing guides are.
There's multiple aspects to the tool. You can use it as a diagnostic to get an overview of where your students are in total. But you can also select the standards and create your own assessments to use in your classroom. So if you want to do a check-in to see if your students have mastered 3 specific standards, you can create your own assessments with it. The other thing is it will group your students. So if you are working on, like with your diagnostic, you give that test, gives you the overview, it groups the students and tells you, these students need this, these 3 standards, these students need these, and these students need all of them. It really helps you to understand what you need to reteach. And then it gives you the things, suggested lessons and printouts that you can use to do those things.
Thank you.
Any other questions for it? We have a motion.
Make a second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Swan Math contract for FY 2022-23.
So our Swan Math is a supplemental resource we use in math. Math has been a target and continues to be a need. It's the area that we've mentioned before that's our greatest need to improve our graduation rate. And that improvement starts, all the way down into TK. So Swan Math is a program that we brought in to help support our math instruction all the way beginning in K-8.
So Swan is a supplemental curriculum. Are we providing the same level of professional development or understanding of the core curriculum, those opportunities to the teachers that we're allocating $700,000 to?
The challenge with Go Math is you don't have the same opportunity to do that. It's just not available in the same way. Not to mention the fact that it's, while the majority of the state did adopt Go Math, we've had it a long time and it hasn't proven itself to really be well aligned with the framework and the state standards and the expectations. Unfortunately, when that framework came out, most of the publishers had gotten started on that work to build those textbooks 2 years prior to the framework. And so it isn't well aligned and doesn't support student success toward the CASP or the standards as a whole.
So can Swan Math be?
Swan Math is more aligned because it was written directly to the framework. But the key for Swan is the level of support that teachers can receive in understanding their math standards and how the best approaches for teaching math. And that's a key piece that's necessary and important.
But it is going to remain a supplemental, correct?
It is. When we have the new framework come out, then we will have a new, menu of choices of math programs that we can review. Hopefully, it's supposed to be out, the new framework sometime this summer, and then our new programs that we see will have time to adjust and address, and then programs that we see coming out within the next year will be better.
Make a motion that we approve this Swan Math contract.
Make a second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Lunch recess support program.
This program, the name has changed this year. You might remember it last year, Sports for Learning. This is the the program that comes in and provides that additional support at schools during lunch with supervised activities that the goal is to keep kids engaged in structured activities during their lunch break and reduce the number of behavior challenges. And the schools did like it and they want to continue that program for next year.
Yeah, I think every site visit I need to see a big thing that's related. So I'll make a motion that we approve this.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. NorCal Relief Liability Excess Fund Contract.
So this is, the Yuba City Unified School District is part of the NorCal Relief Joint Powers Authority for our property and liability insurance. And essentially this is a regular recurring premium, and this is the premium for the 22-23 school year.
Questions, board?
Motion we approve.
A second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of Shade Structures Phase 1 contract.
We've talked about these several times in our meetings, and this is the actual contract. So we're just looking for approval on this contract.
I make a motion to approve shade structures.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 11L, approval of playground replacements.
Similar story. We've talked about this a few times. This is, we went out to, well, actually, this was not we didn't go out for a formal bid because we were able to piggyback onto contract pricing for this one, but this is playground replacements. They did a pretty nice job of showing us renderings of this as well in the description there. And we are looking for approval of this. It is obviously not cheap. I don't know if you saw the price tag of all of that, but it is an expensive playground. So they're very nice structures, and it also includes the poured in place rubber matting. That's about a third of the process price. So they're fairly expensive to install, but the initial installation is pretty expensive because you have to do a lot of prep to it.
But they last pretty well, right?
They do last well, and we have some maintenance that we have to do every couple of years, but our staff will be able to do that in-house. And they're safe, and they are slick looking.
And they should be open to the public, right?
Yeah, I mean,
During off-school hours?
As our kind of policy is, our facilities will be open to the public.
Windcrest was locked up tighter than a drum all weekend.
What's that?
Windcrest was locked up tighter than a drum all weekend. Walked by several times.
Are you checking the gate up there?
I looked it up. I walked all the way around the school. A single gate open.
And we could check to see why the security guards missed that one.
Okay. Scott, I have a question
about
warranties. Is there any opportunity, or is it just a generic, to negotiate the warranties?
No, really not. Yeah, I mean, they it's kind of like buy it or don't.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Buy it when you don't need it, don't buy it when you need it, right?
Right.
There's a motion we approve.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of river bend flooring replacement.
This has been on Mark's kind of to-do list. It is a needed project. Sorry, I lost my place in the agenda. That'll take longer. Yep. So, anyways, these are the quotes for the process. It's also a piggyback bid, so it's already basically set prices for governments to.
Is it
questions?
Is it just the multi-purpose room?
Yes. Yes.
I echo what you want to say.
What was the other one?
state charter school districts for these things.
Motion we approve. There's no other questions?
I'll second that motion.
Motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Board reports and information, do we have any reports?
Not tonight.
Communications, Madam Clerk, do we have any written communications? Pardon?
No.
Next board meeting is July 26th. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just sit here all night. I'm gonna send that to you next time, right? Good evening. I will be very quick. You all know who I am. Mercedes Geraldo, and I represent our classified place. And charter schools. I just don't know what to say. I think the Express, we already have 2 in the district. CC does not support additional charter schools in the district. I know we'll have a public hearing next meeting. I will not be at that meeting. I will be at our conference, our first in-person conference in 3 years. I'm really excited about that. 8 days left of summer school. So, I could do this, right? I've been doing it for years. Seems like every year, why did I do summer school? But I'm seeing these kids progress every day. There's more kids that are getting their credits and we're pushing forward. So that's just really nice. The group that's on the campus that I'm at, I'm at River Valley, the Credential staff, the Crossway staff, we're all working together to make sure that these kids are succeeding. That's just great. They've had a lot of struggles over the last few years. I think as much as they sometimes didn't want to do ingenuity, it seems like that's kind of familiar to them, and so they're sitting down, working, and on their computer. So, sometimes we don't see it when we want to see it, and then all of a sudden it surprises you and we see it. So that's pretty cool. I don't know that I have much else to say other than have a good summer. Happy 4th of July, and I will see you in August. Thursday night, the chapter will be ratifying 3 MOUs for you to approve as a board to get going. So, you'll work on this.
Thank you. Comments from board members?
Please, 4th of July, please stay safe.
Say the same thing. Happy 4th of July, everyone. Enjoy your summer break. Mercedes.
Try to stay cool.
Yeah, that's good. Well, it's getting cooler. Yeah, it's getting cooler.
Superintendent? Now, next board meeting is July 26th. We only have 1 board meeting in July. That being said, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye.